Genesis 32, verse number 1, it says, "And Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. And when Jacob saw them, he said, 'This is God's host.' And he called the name of that place Mahanaim. And Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau his brother unto the land of Seir, the country of Edom." So this is continuing from Genesis chapter number 31. Genesis 32, we see that Jacob goes on his way, and then he meets the angels of God. They meet him. Now, this meeting here precedes the meeting that he will have with Esau. That he's going to have with Esau. And in this, we see this camp. This camp, he says, he names the place Mahanaim. This means two hosts or two camps, according to Scripture. He names this place Mahanaim. Now, this refers to Jacob's camp and the camp of the angels that you see here in verses 1 and 2. And he calls it Mahanaim. 2 Kings 6. We see in 2 Kings 6, verse number 15, it says, "When the servant of the man of God was risen early and gone forth, behold, an host compassed the city both with horses and chariots. And his servant said unto him, Alas, my master, how shall we do? And he answered, Fear not, for they that be with us are more than that be with them. And Elisha," so you have Elisha and his servant, they're here, and when they wake up, we have this host, these chariots of these horses and chariots round about the city, and the servant's scared. But notice verse 17, "And Elisha prayed and said, Lord, I pray thee, open his eyes that he may see. And the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire round about Elisha." Well, these horses of chariots of fire, that's the host of God. That is God's host. And they're between them and those of the enemy round about the city. And Elisha's servant sees it and is like, wow. There's more with us than there is with them now. It's that spiritual side. We've talked about the spiritual world a little bit. And so you have the angels of the Lord that are in horses and chariots of fire that are between them and the enemy. How comforting that must be with Elisha and his servant there in 2 Kings 6. And so what does Jacob see here? Well, it may be that it's very similar. Would it be interesting? Jacob saw horses and chariots of fire there, this camp, and he calls it Mahanaim here. And so this is a comfort to Jacob. Now that's important because what he's about to face. You know what sometimes the Lord will do? He will subtly prepare you for what you're going to face. I've seen that with the Lord. Sometimes He'll prepare you for what you're going to face. Hey, you go into something and you wonder, why did this happen over here? Why did this go on? Well, the Lord was preparing you all along for something else you were about to face. And so He wanted Jacob to know, hey, you're not alone. And you know what, today, Christian, you're not alone. You're not at this alone. When people say, I just feel like nobody cares, I feel like nobody understands, nobody's with me on this. Well, wait a minute. Are you saved? Are you a child of God? You're not alone. Jacob was not alone here. He has two hosts. He has two camps here. He has his camp, but there's the camp of the Lord. There's the camp of God over here that's with him all along, and he's there with him. And Jacob's getting ready to face his greatest fear, and that is his brother Esau. And now he knows that the camp of the Lord is with him, and so he can go into that knowing, hey, God is with me. So Christian, you're not alone. Jacob sends messengers to Esau here in verse number 3. It says, "And Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau his brother unto the land of Seir, the country of Edom. And he commanded them, saying, Thus shall ye speak unto my lord Esau, Thy servant Jacob saith thus, I have sojourned with Laban, and stayed there until now. And I have oxen and asses, flocks and men servants and women servants, and I have sent to tell my lord, that I may find grace in thy sight." So Jacob sends these messengers to Esau. He sends them on ahead. He says, I want you to find Esau. I want you to tell him these words and let him know that his brother's returning into the land. And notice the wording. He says, my lord Esau, thy servant Jacob. You know what Jacob's doing? He's going in humbly before Esau. And listen, Jacob has learned some things while he sojourned. Now Jacob's still Jacob, and he's still going to try to prepare, and there's still those things he's going to be thinking about. But Jacob has learned a few things while he's been away. In a way, and this is going to sound kind of strange, but Laban was good for Jacob in that he got to see himself. You know what the Lord will do sometimes to you? He'll make you see yourself in the mirror of His Word, or He'll make you see yourself in the events of your life and say, wow, that's me. I should be ashamed of myself. Now, you know what? Sometimes we're hard-headed, and we have to see ourselves multiple times. You know what'd be good is if we just learn our lessons early, and we don't have to keep putting our head in a wall. Need to listen what God's trying to tell us. So Jacob is a changed man here, and he's about to have another event that's going to change him even further. But it's taken a journey, and I've said this before. We all have a journey. I can't do your journey. You can't do my journey. Sometimes, obviously the Lord blesses us, and we do our journey with our spouse, and you're together. You're one, two as one. But there's a journey that God's given everybody, and you've got to walk that journey. The best advice I can tell you, especially young people in this room, is learn your lessons early. In fact, my advice is learn your lessons by watching others, and listen when elders tell you something before you go off and do it on your own. And maybe you won't have all the scars that come with experiencing that journey. But Jacob's had to learn some hard lessons. And notice here, he comes back to his brother not as a cocky brother, as the younger brother. He comes back as my lord Esau, thy servant Jacob. He's putting it on. But I think they're part of him, I think he means it. And he says, and I have oxen and asses, flocks and men servants and women servants, and I've sent to tell my Lord, verse number 5, that I may find grace in thy sight. He's not coming back as, hey, Esau, look what all I have. Look, hey, I'm back. No, he's coming back, if I found grace in your sight. You know what? It'd do us good to have a humble spirit with one another. Even to the point of when someone's just frustrated you with no end. Come back with a humble spirit. Sometimes we want to lash back. I was telling Pastor about something I had to deal with someone in the community recently, just before service, and I could have shot back, and I could have been cocky about it. But what would that have done? That would have just made an enemy of somebody I have no business making an enemy. Why would I want to do that? It's like, okay, yeah, we'll deal with that. We'll take care of that. So, you know what? That preserves a relationship, and you're not blowing stuff up. But if I come back with a cocky, proud attitude, yeah, I feel good in the heat of the moment, but I might have years of regret because I have to see that person. We need to quit being cocky. A lot of our problems today. So what does Jacob do? Well, the messengers return, verse number 6, to Jacob, saying, we came to thy brother Esau, and also he cometh to meet thee, and 400 men with him. Now, it doesn't take much guesswork to go, why in the world does he need to meet me with 400 men? I'm a dead man, right? Why does he need to have 400 men to meet me? With my family and my servants and my herd and cattle and sheep. This is not good. I mean, on the surface, right? The messengers turned into recon is what they did. Like, okay, this isn't good. Now, sometimes appearances can be deceiving. And now, did the Lord change Esau's heart? Maybe. Again, these are things we have no record of. I don't know. Maybe he was coming with the intent. And God met with him like he did Laban. We don't know. But maybe we just go with the fact that maybe he's wanting to make sure he protects his brother. That's how I'm going with it. But see, here's the thing. Sometimes appearances can be deceiving. And that's why we tend to overthink sometimes, don't we? Now, I don't mean to go off and have no circumspection about you. If I'm using a word that's real, my wife's grinning at me. I'll find out. We'll check that later. I'll check that against the dictionary later. But you do. But let me just say this. The Bible tells us to be as wise as serpents and as harmless as doves. So, yeah, go in prepared, but don't go in with a full intention that this is going to be horrible. And that's hard sometimes, because we get something stuck in our mind and we go in with a full thought that this is going to happen. So we start thinking that way, so then we start reacting that way. And folks, when you start reacting that way in a situation, you will create the situation. I've had to tell people that, look, you can't live there, because you're going to be leery of everybody, and you're going to cause what you are afraid of.
Yes, right.
And you can't do that. But with that said, let's keep looking at the life of Jacob. Jacob divides his people here. Now let's read a few of these verses here. And then Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed, and he divided the people that was with him, and the flocks and the herds and the camels, into 2 bands, and said, if Esau come to the one company and smite it, then the other company which is left shall escape. And Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham, and the God of my father Isaac, the Lord which saidst unto me, return into thy country and to thy kindred, and I will deal well with thee. I am not worthy of the least of all thy mercies. Now, before we read his prayer here, let me mention this. Jacob, in haste, starts preparing for the worst. Now, I want to be very careful. I'm not trying to correct the Bible. This is what Jacob did. But if Jacob would have done something a little different, maybe it would have been better. What if he had prayed first? But what is he doing? He's preparing. Again, this is where I say Jacob's not rid of Jacob yet. What's he doing? He's preparing in the heat of the moment first. He divides his camp. He's already 2, now he's going to make 4. We'll see that in just a minute. So what is he doing? He's planning, okay, this is going to be bad. Okay, I need to divide up. I need to do this and this and this. You know what? That's what we do, don't we? We see something and go, okay, I can do this, and I can do it this like this way, and I think I've got it. Okay, I guess I need to pray. Whoa! Why don't you pray then prepare? Because then you have the wisdom of God on you. But that's not what Jacob did. Jacob prepared first. I'm going to ask for a show of hands, but how many are guilty of that? You don't have to raise your hand, but I'll raise mine. I'll do that sometimes. As soon as I hear something, I'm going, okay, I can do this, and maybe we can do this over here. It's just second nature, especially guys, okay? We want to fix things. We are in the fixing business. And that's why, let me say, ladies, when you come to your husband and says, hey, I got this and this, and all you want to do, you just want a sounding board, don't you? But you know what men are doing all the while? Well, if we did this, I can fix that for her. And if we do this, because you know what we're doing? We're already in our mind. I'm not critiquing. I'm telling you what goes on in the mind of a regular man. We're sitting there going, I need to fix this. It's in our nature. I've got to fix this. This is horrible. I feel bad for my wife. I need to do this. But that's not what she wants. She just wants you to hear her out. Right? Guys, right? Oh, it's quiet in here. I'm not critiquing the ladies. I get it. Your minds are this way and our minds are this way. We're trying to fix. We legitimately, a good husband wants to help. What's horrible is when he sits there and goes, I don't know how I can fix that. And then we just short circuit because we can't fix it. That's where we're at. And so what's Jacob doing? He's fixing the problem. My brother's coming here with all these men, these 400 men. I've got to fix this. Okay, I'm going to plan. If I can divide my people up, and if he takes out one, we can still escape. But you know what Jacob should have done? He should have prayed. You know what us guys should do? Okay, honey, all right, talk to me. And just hear her out. All right, honey, let's pray about this. And then, if we can fix something, let's fix something. Now, do I always do that? Because you know where I'm at? My mind's going, I can fix this. Let me put this over here. Let's do this. Yeah. But sometimes they just need to hear us out, don't they? Or that we need to hear them out. But Jacob is trying to fix the situation. But what Jacob should be doing is what he does after he starts planning. But I'll give Jacob this. Jacob goes to the Lord. See, the Lord had to come to him when he was on his way to Haran, didn't he? Now what's Jacob doing? Jacob's going to the Lord. Jacob's learning. Jacob's learning. So let's read this prayer now. Verse number 9. And Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham and the God of my father Isaac, the Lord, which saidst unto me, Return into thy country and to thy kindred, and I will deal well with thee. I am not worthy of the least of all the mercies and of all the truth which thou hast showed unto thy servant. For with my staff I passed over this Jordan, and now I am become two bands. Deliver me, I pray thee, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, lest he will come and smite me and the mother with the children. And thou saidst, I will surely do thee good, and make thy seed as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude. Now, I want to break this prayer down very quickly for just a moment. Jacob goes to the Lord in a humble manner. Notice what he says here. Verse number 10. I am not worthy of the least of all the mercies and of all the truth which thou hast showed unto thy servant. He comes humbly before God. You know what sometimes we have to do? We have to come humbly before our Lord and say, Lord, you know what? I'm not even worthy of what you've done for me. I'm not worthy of the least of thy mercies. I'm not worthy of all the goodness that you've bestowed upon me. But you know the situation I'm in. You have been more than good to me. And I think everybody under the sound of my voice here this morning, I know sitting here, can say, if they're honest, that you've not been worthy of anything that God's done for you. Everything you have is a gift from God. Everything that has been given to you, everything that is yours this morning has been given to you by God. Your family, your children, your home, the house that you have, the roof over your head, has all been a gift from God. If you have a family this morning, you have been blessed. If you've got if you have a wife that's here with you this morning that loves the Lord, that is a gift from God. That is God's mercies. And Jacob here, he says, Lord, I am not worthy of thy mercies and of all the truth which thou hast showed unto thy servant. Listen, we've been given a book in our language, a book that is perfect. There are people that would long to be able to read this book that are behind borders that it's illegal. They couldn't carry this outside. In fact, they have to hide it. We can carry this down the street to this day in this nation. God has been good to us. We can till now we can still proclaim it on a street corner without fear of harassment. That may change soon, but in our area, we've been blessed with that. I've had conversations with law enforcement in this community where they welcome this kind of thing. That's a gift. I'm impressed. But listen, we have been blessed by the Lord. And so Jacob here, just like Jacob, we can say, the Lord, we've not been worthy of the least. The least. That means the smallest amount of your mercies, Lord, have been more than what we deserve. And he says here, and of all the truth which thou hast showed unto thy servant. He says, for thou my staff, I passed over this Jordan, and now I'm become two bands. Then he goes into his request, deliver me, I pray thee, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him. Now, let me say this. For a man to admit he's afraid is a hard thing. It's hard. You know what he's doing? He's going to the Lord and he says, Lord, I might not tell Rachel this. I might not tell Leah this. I might not even tell my boys this. But God, I'm scared. It's hard for a man to admit his fear. Ladies, I'll be honest with you, man, it's hard for him to tell you what he's afraid of. But you know what? God already knew what he was afraid of. When's the last time you've been honest with the Lord? What's your fear this morning? You say, I don't have any. Yeah, you do. Maybe it's your health. Maybe it's your finances. Maybe it's dealing with somebody. But you got a fear. We guard those fears, don't we? Ladies, you have your fears. Maybe it's a fear of being alone one day. Why don't you take it to God? He already knows. You know what this is? This is Jacob taking the mask off and being honest with God of what his fears are. When's the last time you went to God and just took your mask off? God already knows what's behind it. You say, we don't have a mask. Yeah, you do. There's plenty of people that wear a mask. Sometimes in front of very good close friends, they wear a mask. But you know what we need to do? We need to be honest with ourselves and tell God, you don't have to be, I would love for you to be honest with me, but the most important person you need to be honest with is God. That's the most important. Just take the mask off and be honest with the Lord. Tell Him what you're afraid of. Tell Him what's troubling you. Tell Him about your plans. Tell Him about whatever. Take it to the Lord. Do I want my friends to be up front and just completely who they are? Yeah. But most importantly, they need to be that with the Lord. That's the most important. But unfortunately, we live in a society today where we're all behind masks, if we're honest. Jacob here has worn a mask, but he takes it off in front of God. He says, Lord, would you deliver me from my brother? And what's the latter half of verse 11? For I fear him, lest he will come and smite me and the mother with the children. That was his fear. That was his fear. Now, Jacob's unworthiness here is proper. It's the proper mindset for the servant of God. Let's look at a few verses on this. Turn over to Romans chapter number 8. If we compare this to what the Lord's done for us, the Apostle Paul says, For I reckon that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us. You know what he says? Look, I'm going to have some sufferings. I'm going to have some sorrows, but it's worth it with what I will one day, the glory I'm going to share with the Lord, the glory that God's going to give us. It's worthy. The things that we face today as Christians, as a child of God, are not to be compared to the glory that we will have with the Lord one day, folks. It's worth it all. And if you will, turn over to, let me see here. Turn over, if you will, to Philippians chapter number 2, verse number 3. This mindset of not being worthy is the proper mindset for us as Christians. Now, I said a moment ago how that Jacob, he was kind of cocky maybe before, or he was, there's that pride that we carry. That has to go. If we're going to be servants of God, that has to go. We have a pride problem in today's society, and it permeates even into the Christian circles. It is a problem in society. Philippians 2:3 says, Let nothing be done through strife or vainglory, but in lowliness of mind let each esteem other better than themselves. Now, let me make sure you understand. I'm not saying that you're a doormat for everybody, because then that's not proper. Because the person doing it is acting in pride. But no, there's that understanding that, hey, I'm no better than my brother or sister over there, and they're no better than me. We are equal before God. We have a servant's heart that we should have with each other. 1 Timothy 1:5 says, Now the end of the commandment is charity out of a pure heart and of a good conscience and a faith unfeigned. Now, we don't have time to get into that, but I would challenge you, and we've had these studies here at Antioch. Pastors taught on this. I've had the opportunity to teach a little bit. Charity is the pinnacle of a Christian walk, and we've made it clear that's not like how we think of charity today. Well, I'm giving to charity. No. Charity it's the pinnacle of the Christian attributes of what a Christian should have. It is that care for one another that we ought to have for each other and for those around us. It's the proper mindset of the servant of God. And so, how are you today? Notice, Jacob's prayer really shows how we ought to be. He says, I'm not worthy of the least of the mercies and of all the truth which thou hast showed unto thy servant. And what you're going to see here in a few minutes is when he deals with Esau, it is a different Jacob. Very different from the Jacob that had left many years before. It is that, hey, I want to give you this. I want to be a blessing to you. That's how we ought to be. It's a totally different mindset of the way the world would say, hey, get what you can and when you can. It's entirely different. Now, we talked about his deliverance. He asked the Lord to deliver him, and he expressed his fear of Esau. We've already mentioned how that for him to admit that was a feat. It's a feat. He reminds God then of verse number 12, and thou saidest, I will surely, back in our context, I will surely do thee good and make thy seed as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude. He reminds God, Lord, you had said you will make my seed as the sand of the sea. What's he doing? He's reminding God of God's promises. Lord, you told me. And remember, if that's going to happen, I can't die at the hand of Esau. Right? Now, here's the thing. Jacob gets nervous. Well, if the Lord's promised this, he can't die at the hand of Esau. You say, well, Jacob should have just had more faith. All right. Then look in the mirror, friend. God's made you some promises. He says, I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. I will be with thee. We give these Old Testament saints a hard time because we see the whole story, but let's be honest, we're no different. Mankind has not changed in the thousands of years that he's walked on this earth. Because you know why? We get nervous about what we cannot control. I had a conversation with someone recently. People get anxious. They have anxiety problems. You know why? Because we don't trust the one that gave us our breath. We start trying to control what we cannot control. Control what you can control and give what you cannot control to God. Now again, that's easy to say until you're in the pressure cooker, right? I've been there. But we've got to remind ourselves, we've got to take a step back and go, wait a minute, God has this, God knows my situation, I'm going to pray and ask the Lord, you've got to work on my behalf and see this through. Because He's ultimately the one in control. But I really think, and I'm not saying all the time, I know there's situations people need things, but I do think that a good percentage of the anxiety issues and the problems people face with mental health could be resolved in this book. But you know what they do? They'd rather pop a pill. They'd rather listen to a psychiatrist. They'd rather lay on someone's couch and tell all their trouble. And again, I think there's a small room for some of that. But I think a majority would really be answered in the pages of this book. People just don't want to give up control. But the truth is, they're not in control. They just don't want to admit it right here. And again, that's not easy, but it's true. Verse number, let's see here, back in our passage, verse number 13. And Jacob here, he says, and he lodged there that same night and took of that which came to his hand a present for Esau his brother, 200 she-goats and 20 he-goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 milk camels with their colts, 40 kine and 10 bulls, 20 she-asses and 10 foals. And he delivered them into the hand of his servants, every drove by themselves, and said unto his servants, pass over before me, and put a space betwixt drove and drove. And he commanded the foremost, saying, when Esau my brother meeteth thee, and asketh thee, saying, whose art thou? And whither goest thou? And whose are these before thee? Then thou shalt say, they be thy servant Jacob's. It is a present sent unto my lord Esau. And behold, also he is behind us. And so commanded he the second and the third, and all that followed the drove, saying, on this manner shall ye speak unto Esau when ye find him. And say ye moreover, behold, thy servant Jacob is behind us. For he said, I will appease him with the present that goeth before me, and afterward I will see his face. Peradventure he will accept of me. So went the present over before him, and himself lodged that night in the company. And he rose up that night and took his 2 wives and his 2 women servants and his 11 sons and passed over the ford Jabbok. And he took them and sent them over the brook and sent over that he had. So what's Jacob doing? I said, Jacob's still Jacob. Jacob's still trying to, okay, I'm going to send this present, and I'm going to send this other present, I'm going to send this other. I'm going to load him down, so if by chance he is hotly wanting to pursue me and hurt me, I will appease him with these gifts. It's like, Jacob, you're still manipulating the situation. You're still trying to control something that you cannot control. We try to do that so much in our lives, don't we? Well, I'll do this and that will help the situation. Why don't you just go and say, look, I was wrong. I was dirty with you. I did this. This is wrong of me. I'm sorry. No, he's still trying. I'm going to win him over with all this. Well, that's about to change. Because God's going to intervene. Now notice something here. Verse number 24. And Jacob was left alone, and there wrestled a man with him until the breaking of the day. Do you know what had to happen to Jacob? He had to be left alone. And I mentioned early on in our lesson here how that we all have a journey. We all have a race. We all have a journey. We all have something that no one else can do for us. Jacob had to be left of everything he had. And you know who comes and meets him? God. There are things in this life that only you and God are going to be able to walk through together with. No one else is going to be able to fight till the morning. No one else is going to be able to wrestle the battle that you have to wrestle. You have to be alone with God, and you have to face challenges that no one else can face. And gentlemen especially, and Pastor, I think we had this conversation some time ago. Every generation, every individual has something in their life that they have to fight through and come out on the other side victorious. For one generation, it may be one thing. For the next generation, it's something else. And you will be tried and you will be tested to see how you're made. And yours may be different from someone else's. Jacob here had to wrestle with God. Notice, and when he saw that he prevailed not against him, he touched the hollow of his thigh, and the hollow of Jacob's thigh was out of joint as he wrestled with him. And he said, Let me go, for the day breaketh. And he said, I will not let thee go, except thou bless me. And he said unto him, What is thy name? And he said, Jacob. And he said, Thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel. For as a prince hast thou power with God and with men, and hast prevailed. And Jacob asked him and said, Tell me, I pray thee, thy name. And he said, Wherefore is it thou dost ask after my name? And he blessed him there. And Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. And as he passed over Peniel, the sun rose upon him, and he halted upon his thigh. Jacob wrestled with God till the morning. And because that happened, what happened? When he didn't prevail, he touched the hollow of Jacob's thigh, and it was out of joint. Do you know what happens when you've been through the fire? You're changed. Jacob was not the same person. It physically changed him, but let me tell you, sometimes what happens to you may physically change you, but it will mentally and spiritually change you. There are life-changing events in folks' lives that prepare them for the future. And what happens to me may not be what happens to you. What happens to the next person may be different, but God is going to take you through something, and sometimes more than something, to change who you are in life, and you've got to let the Lord do that to you. So he wrestled alone. Matthew 26:56, but all this was done that the scriptures of the prophets might be fulfilled. Then all the disciples forsook him and fled. You know, for Jesus, and I know it's the Son of God, all the disciples fled from him. Every one of them. For you, and you know what? Jesus was left there to to be tried by himself. Hosea 12:3 says, He took his brother by the heel in the womb, talking about Jacob, and by his strength he had power with God. Yea, he had power over the angel and prevailed. He wept and made supplication unto him. He found him in Bethel, and there he spake with us. Even the Lord God of hosts, the Lord is his memorial. And what do we see? He wrestled until the morning. Jacob's encounter here, the Lord gives him a name. His name is Israel after this, and it's a prince of God. His fame was that he had power with God and with man. You can find that in Galatians 1 and James chapter 5. Verse number 32 of chapter 32, it says, Therefore the children of Israel eat not of the sinew which shrank, which is upon the hollow of the thigh, unto this day, because he touched the hollow of Jacob's thigh in the sinew that shrank. Now chapter number 33, it says, And Jacob lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, Esau came, and with him 400 men. And he divided the children unto Leah and unto Rachel and unto the two handmaids. And he put the handmaids at their children foremost, and Leah at her children after, and Rachel and Joseph hindermost. Notice how he's positioning them. You have Rachel and Joseph at the very back, right? They're the most well protected. And he passed over before them and bowed himself to the ground 7 times until he came near to his brother. And Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell upon his neck and kissed him, and they wept. Do you think Jacob thought that was going to be the encounter? He probably thought Esau's going to pull a sword and I'm a dead man. Now, I will say he went out at the very front. He's protecting his family, folks. He's doing what he should. He probably thought he was going to die. That's not what he did. He didn't go for a sword. He went for his neck, but not to hurt him, but to hug and embrace him and show how much he cared about him. And he lifted up his eyes and saw Esau here. And he lifted up his eyes and saw the women and the children and said, Who are those with thee? And he said, The children which God hath graciously given thy servant. Then the handmaidens came near, they and their children, and they bowed themselves. And Leah also with her children came near and bowed themselves. And after came Joseph near and Rachel, and they bowed themselves. And he said, What meanest thou by all this drove which I met? And all those gifts, all those presents, right? And he said, These are to find grace in the sight of my Lord. And Esau said, I have enough, my brother. Keep thou hast unto thyself. And Jacob said, Nay, I pray thee, if now I have found grace in thy sight, then receive my present at my hand, for therefore I have seen thy face as though I had seen the face of God, and thou wast pleased with me. Take, I pray thee, my blessing that is brought to thee, because God hath dealt graciously with me, and because I have enough. And he urged him, and he took it. Now, in this culture, to not take a gift would actually show a denial of friendship. By him taking that was actually an approval. And he said, Let us take our journey and let us go, and I will go before thee. Now, Esau is going to try to get him to go with him, and Jacob doesn't. He says, Look, the children and the cattle are going to be overdriven if I go with you. A great principle here is that, again, Esau being a picture of the world, you can't walk with the world, folks. He's going to go down back to Edom. Jacob has plans to go up to the country that God's blessed him with. You've got to part ways with those of the world. But now, just from this context, let me say, Esau's not a bitter man. Remember, he says, I'm going to kill him. The day of my father's death is when it draws near. Esau's changed. Esau's not this brother that's looking for revenge. Esau is this one that says, Look, my brother's come home. I love him. I want to see him. I want to embrace him. Time has healed the wound. Yeah. And Jacob all along, I got to do something about it. You know what you need to do sometimes? You just need to step back and let God fight your battle and say, Lord, I've prepared everything I can prepare. But Lord, you are in control. What are you trying to control this morning? What are you trying to manipulate this morning into your favor? Why don't you just give it to God and say, Lord, I'm going to be forthright and honest, and I just need to let you fight my battle that I have. Are you letting